Hi everybody, Maureen Morrison here. VAP's been playing around with AI-created pictures recently, and I thought all of you might want to see some of them. As you can see, she got the AI to do a whole bunch of 1960s and 1970s style pictures of girls in swimsuits. The ones with weird colored hair were to test if the AI was able to understand what she wanted from just typing it in. Isn't AI getting good at looking mostly realistic? And it's sounding realistic too, if you know what I mean.
Objectifying women and promoting job-stealing AI? Maureen, I'd expect this from VAP, but not from you.
What are you talking about? I'm a girl myself. I just think it's really neat how fast AI got this powerful. And I also like how it's able to make new photos of Annette Funny-Sella. She was so pretty and talented. Hey, Nobuko.
Hey Maureen, what's all this about girls in bikinis? And isn't it pronounced Funicello?
That's corrupted Maureen's innocent young mind. Now she thinks it's okay to train computers to be job-stealing, woman-objectifying perverts.
Hey, if anyone loses their job to an AI, they probably weren't very good at it in the first place. And objectification isn't real. You're just mad that VAP didn't use the AI to make, like, pictures of you with your shirt off.
Ew!
And now VAP Talks Comics.
Hi, VAP-Chan here with another episode of VAP Talks Comics. And with me this episode is Maureen Morrison, the alternate universe Minky Momo of 1962.
Hello out there.
So, Maureen, what did you think of the second largest ball of barbed wire?
It was pretty fun.
Yeah, fascinating what some people are able to make during their spare time. I bet you know a lot about having too much spare time, VAP. Get a real job. Bite me, you pretentious ponce. You first, you terminally online lolicon. Don't make me tell Nobuko to bring out the lawn darts again. Sorry about that, Maureen.
It's okay. I'm not afraid of the guy who thinks he's Oscar Wilde. Does he even have a real name?
I don't know. So, Maureen, what comic are we going to be checking out today?
This magazine is Haunted number 18 from July 1954.
Ooh, a Charlton comic. You know, 1954 is the year the Comics Code went into effect. Let's see if this turns out to be one of the last great violent horror comics, or one of the first to be bloodless and sterile.
And away we go.
The cover, depicting a man drowning in a swamp as another man in the background prepares to chuck a second victim in, is amazing.
Yep, and this is definitely pre-cut. What with the guy drowning horribly, although a drowning is pretty mild for a pre-cut horror cover.
And how? You ever see the one where a boy's hands and face are melting off from uranium exposure?
Oh-ha. Or how about the one where a guy's just chopped up his wife and he's holding her decapitated head by the hair? Or the one where a guy's about to get a white-hot poker shoved in his eyeball?
Geez, I hope all this talk of people getting maimed doesn't give you nightmares tonight.
Don't worry, Vappy, I'm okay.
What just happened to your voice, Maureen?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
The inside cover is, like always, an advert, this time for a bodybuilding course. I usually think it's kinda odd when things like this are advertised in comics, but since horror comics were meant more for teens and adults, it actually kinda makes sense here.
The first story of the issue is The Last Earl. It opens on a splash panel of the same scene as the cover, except this time the drowning guy doesn't have any eyes.
VAP, why the hell are you throwing this horrible crap to a— How old are you anyway, Maureen?
I'd be,
Need a calculator, dear?
I'm okay, Vappy. If I aged normally, I'd be 73 this November.
You cartoons are messed up! The story opens on Xanadu, the hideously deformed son of the Earl of Wolfdane, reading from an ancient book that promises great riches to whoever sacrifices 3 people and dumps their bodies in the swamp. But his 3 asshole brothers barge in, insulting him for believing in fairy stories and legends of the devil. His goateed brother Ulrich has become the new Earl of Wolfdane and orders the book taken away and burnt. Hey, let's see how long we can go without making the most obvious joke about Xanadu's name. Ulrich reminds Xanadu that even if the swamp treasure was found, it had belonged to him as he's the Earl, and Xanadu is the last in line of succession. So Xanadu runs off to the swamp where he plots to ruin his 3 brothers' lives.
And a few days later, Xanadu lies in wait with a huge club as a courier for the king rides through the swamp. He fakes having a broken leg to lure the courier to him, and bashes his head in. This is probably the best drawing of a hunchback beating up a courier I've ever seen in my life.
How many of those have you seen? But agreed. Xanadu steals the secret papers the courier was meant to deliver and plants them in Ulrich's room. Ulrich is put on trial for spying and is found guilty. The judge sentences him to a horrifying punishment.
Hold on to your hats, folks. If you had any doubts this was pre-code, they're about to be gone.
Ulrich is taken to a dungeon where his eyes are gouged out.
Look, they even drew the blood seeping out.
Yeah, it's that attention to detail that makes these old horror comics so great. For the love of God, VAP, you're gonna make her grow up to be a serial killer. She'd be 73 if she aged normally, remember?
Yeah, I was born in 1950.
Then what, may I ask? Is the reason VAP keeps saying you're from 1962?
Because that's the year I went on my first great adventure.
It's a really long story and a very interesting one. You see, Maureen's biological parent...
A week later, Xanadu traps a tax collector in a noose, robs him, and blames his brother Gascon for everything.
Well, hi, Nobuko.
Hey, Maureen, I just thought I'd cut VAP off right there before she starts going off topic. The guy who thinks he's Oscar Wilde hates that, you know.
Actually, I really wanted to hear Maureen's life story. It'd be a damn sight better than this repulsive comic.
Oh, well, too bad. Maureen's story is too action-packed for a big jellyfish like you anyway. Now, let's see what happens to Gascon. He's found guilty and is sentenced to having his hands chopped off. Look, they even drew the mangled stumps.
Yeah, I just wish the artist drew them closer up. But at least we get another great drawing of Xanadu's fugly face. A few days later, Ulrich and Gascon go to the swamp to try to find the man who framed them.
They're so doomed.
Right you are, as Xanadu immediately ambushes them and chucks the blind Ulrich into the swamp. As Ulrich drowns, Gascon threatens to beat Xanadu up with his bare hands. I think Gascon might be suffering from short-term memory loss. Predictably, Gascon gets his head smashed in by Xanadu's club and is sacrificed to the swamp as well. Xanadu then blames his only surviving brother Mordred for the murders. Mordred is of course found guilty.
And has his heart ripped out of his friggin' chest.
Holy cats.
Yeah, I'm kinda glad they don't fully show this one. Even for a pre-code comic aimed at teens and adults, actually showing a bloody, ripped-out heart would be going a little too far. Xanadu, now the last surviving brother, and new Earl, dumps Mordred's dead body into the swamp, and sets about building the first diving helmet. Soon, Xanadu journeys underwater, where he finds the secret entrance to the legendary treasure.
Wait, who's pumping the air into his helmet?
Maureen, if he's smart enough to build a diving helmet in medieval times, he was probably able to build a motorized pump for it, too. Feels kinda weird that I'm the one saying that, and not Holly. Where's she at, anyway? She's out shopping, VAP. Oh, thanks for the info, Lauren. Lauren's our camera operator. She's rarely on screen in person, being behind the camera and everything, but I keep a picture of her hanging on the wall behind me to sate her massive ego. Hey! Slowly, Xanadu creeps up to the entrance. Slowly, he opens the door, and inside he sees...
His murdered brothers returned from the dead.
Hooray!
The three shambling, rotting ghouls advance upon Xanadu and start hacking him up with a knife.
That's gotta be one rusty knife being underwater for hundreds of years.
Now Ulrich has a new set of eyes, Gascon a new pair of hands, and Mordred a new heart. The story ends on an awesome shot of Xanadu's mangled corpse rotting at the bottom of the swamp.
And to add insult to injury, centuries later they named a terrible Olivia Newton-John movie after him.
Yes, thank you, Nobuko.
Wow, I loved that one, Vappy.
I did too, Maureen. Let's see if the next story is just as good. The second story of the issue is Bridegroom Come Back.
The art style here looks really familiar.
Look at the artist's signature. This was drawn by Steve Ditko. Before he helped create Spider-Man for Marvel, Ditko worked for Charlton Comics on stuff like this. Even after his Marvel work, he'd still go back to Charlton now and then.
The first page makes it look like the story's going to be from the perspective of the titular bridegroom.
Titular.
Well, the second page reveals it's from the perspective of a sentient wedding gown.
As its buyer tries it on, the gown thinks, "This is the moment I was born for, when at last I am enfolding a warm, vibrant body that throbs with happiness." Ew! Soon, the gown's owner is married to an evil man who looks eerily similar to Vincent Price. Hey Lauren, how many outdated cultural references so far this episode? 4 now. 5 if you count the one about lawn darts.
The gown knows its owner's new husband is evil, but it can't tell her because it can't talk.
After the wedding, the bride rubs her face all over the gown. Vincent Price is not pleased.
The gown hangs up in a closet for months, pissing and moaning about how much it wants to feel the woman inside it.
Yeah, the gown's weird codependent relationship towards its owner is getting kind of annoying.
Oh, I think it's cute. It reminds me of the Brave Little Toaster.
Huh, didn't think you would have seen that movie. Anyway, one day the door finally opens, and it's Vincent Price. Predictably, he's murdered the wife.
He takes the gown to a pawn shop where he gets $20 for it. You know, $20 in 1954 money is $226 in 2023 money.
No, I didn't know that. Good job, Vincent Price. Well, except for the killing your wife bit. One day, a creepy woman with netting over her face comes into the pawn shop and buys the gown.
It turns out she's getting married to the Vincent Price-looking guy.
After the wedding, the woman refuses to take off the gown. Hey, what's Vincent smoking there?
As the newlyweds get into the car, Vincent makes sure his new wife withdrew all her cash from the bank earlier that day.
Wait, the SJWs told me women weren't allowed to have their own bank accounts back then. Surely they couldn't have been full of crap.
The wife says all the money is in her purse, and Vincent reaches into the glove compartment for his... Ew, look how hairy his hand is.
Vincent pulls a gun on his new bride and fires it into her chest. Check out the bizarre colors in that middle panel. He looks like a human test pattern.
But the bride just sits there with a huge bloodless bullet hole in her chest because she was dead the whole time. Vincent Price's new wife is really his old wife back from the dead to get revenge. Hooray!
As the skeletal bride drags Vincent off to a conveniently nearby open grave, the gown monologues. I am happy now. I shall never hang in a dark closet again, gathering dust, accumulating moth holes, longing to be stroked by warm hands. I am happy now, for now I shall be worn for all eternity.
Wow, that story was pretty great, Vappy. I just hope nobody will think we're actually trying to say the real Vincent Price was a murderer.
I don't think they will.
Good. Now on to the next terror tale.
In every episode so far, I've mentioned the unreadable short story page that old comics would use to get a cheaper shipping rate, but this time it's different. The story's actually really good.
It's called The Land of No Place. It's about a scientist who, inspired by his daughter playing with bubbles, creates a type of bubble that sends anything that gets trapped inside it into the fifth dimension.
The scientist goes nuts while working on it and ends up using it on humans. Of course, in the end, his own invention is turned on him, and he's stuck in the fifth dimension forever, possibly alone.
I'd really like to see someone make a movie of this someday.
I mean, this comic is public domain, so it's not like you'd have to pay anyone for the rights to adapt it.
The third story of the issue is called Caretaker of the Dead. It opens on a grave robber named Charlie Depper breaking into a cemetery to steal jewelry off the corpses.
The skeleton he disinterrs is wearing a gold ring, but when Charlie tries to pull the ring off, the skeleton's hand moves.
Well, of course it moved. He was pulling on it.
No, look, it really did move.
Yeah, the skeleton balled its hand into a fist and proceeded to beat Charlie to death for desecrating its grave. I mean, it balled its hand into a fist so that Charlie couldn't get the ring off its finger. Charlie passes out from fright, and when he awakens, the caretaker of the cemetery, Emil Glossick, is standing over him. Glossick takes Charlie back to his house, which is on the cemetery grounds, and as Charlie eats the first meal he's had in 2 days, Glossick interrogates him. Are earthly possessions so important to you that you resort to ghouling, scrounging the graves of the dead? As opposed to the graves of those still alive, I guess. Charlie replies he'd do anything to get rich, and is immediately gifted the deed to Glossick's house and a key to the strongbox containing his life savings. Charlie, because he's a world-class jerk, suspects an ulterior motive.
Glossick tells Charlie to take the gift and get out, but Charlie,
who, as we've established, is a world-class jerk,
claims the key and the deed are actually worthless and tells Glossick he's staying, possibly for a few days. Hey, am I the only one who thinks Glossick sounds like a Don Martin sound effect?
In bed that night, Charlie gloats. I noticed there's no telephone, so the old man can't contact anybody without my knowing. I wonder if this line was added at the last second so readers wouldn't wonder why Glossick didn't just call the cops.
But suddenly, Charlie hears voices coming from the other room.
He opens the door and sees Glossick talking to a giant pile of rock salt.
Vap, those are supposed to be ghosts.
Well, those are some pretty undetailed ghosts. I'd expect this from a postcode horror comic, but not from one that's actually good.
Glossick explains to Charlie that this is why he tried to get him to leave. The cemetery is haunted. Charlie doesn't believe him, even though he just saw the ghosts, until...
Suddenly he heard the grinding of teeth. He glanced at the window and at the ghastly white faces. What ghastly white faces? The 2 white smudges on the window? I don't know if the artist was going for a formless will-o'-the-wisp type of thing for the ghosts, or...
Perhaps I can be of assistance?
What is it, Nobuko?
This story is actually a crappy reprint of a comic from 1952, Custodian of the Dead from Beware Terror Tales, #1. See, the ghosts were originally printed with light blue outlines to show how ghostly they are.
Good to see that the artist is actually capable of drawing a ghost, but why are they missing from the reprint?
You know what thecanization is, right?
Oh yeah, back then the original pen and ink art for comics was seen as worthless after the printing plates had been made, and usually the printing plates would end end up getting recycled to save money. So if they wanted to reprint an older comic, even one that was only a few years old, there was only one way to easily do it. Take a copy of that comic, rip all the pages out, and bleach them to remove all the colors. I guess since the ghosts were printed using light blue ink, the thecanization process wiped them out entirely, and Charlton didn't care enough to get one of their artists to go back and draw them in. Thanks for actually doing the research, Nobuko.
Well, somebody has to do it, and Holly's not in this episode.
Glossick tells Charlie about how, years ago, he came to this cemetery one evening to mourn his dead friend, when the ghosts appeared and elected him the cemetery's new caretaker. Ever since, Glossick has only left the cemetery in order to shop in the town. Even then, the ghosts follow him around.
That is why I gave you the key and the deed, but now you are doomed. Is he doomed, Glossick? Is he? The ghosts are creepy, sure. Well, at least in the original version where you can actually see them. But they don't seem to be actually evil or anything. I mean, being forced to be a cemetery caretaker would kinda suck, but it's not like the ghosts are murderous or cannibalistic. They're just annoying and needy, like that sentient wedding gown. Suddenly, the ghosts come back in. Charlie screams, "Ugh-gah-gah-gah-gah-gah-gah." First time I've ever seen a scream spelled like that, before breaking out through the friggin' window. Whoever drew this...
Comic Book Plus says it's Shelley Moldoff.
Thanks, Nobuko. Shelley Moldoff is really skimping out on the blood here. If the last Earl guy drew this...
Bill Molno ghosting for Joe Shuster.
Yes, thank you. If Bill Molno drew this, Charlie would be a hacked-up bloody mess in that right panel. Come on, Moldoff, this is pre-code. Give us the cartoon gore we crave.
Charlie runs to the town, trying to evade the ghosts. He tries to hide in a diner, but soon he sees the ghosts peeking in on him through the window.
Or at least they would be, if this reprint wasn't wrecked by thecanization.
Look at him. He gets high on plain coffee, says some random asshole as he watches Charlie freak out.
But no matter where Charlie runs, the ghosts are right behind him.
But when he sees a cop, Charlie gets an idea. Charlie punches the cop in the face and, according to plan, is arrested. He's sentenced to a year in prison, 1 year away from his ghostly pursuers. Don't ask what's keeping the ghosts from just following him into the cell. When Charlie is eventually released, he goes to Glossick's house to find out if the money left to him really exists.
Glossick wasn't lying about the strongbox being full of money. Charlie finds thousands of dollars inside.
Thousands of dollars that he uses to restore the old house Glossick deeded to him. But one night, Charlie gets a phone call. It's from Glossick.
Glossick tells Charlie he wants to meet him alone so he can give him another money-filled strongbox.
He's alone, so that means he's escaped too. So the old goat is still giving things away, exclaims Charlie as he runs to Glossick's car. But Charlie isn't excited for long, as Glossick starts driving towards the cemetery.
Charlie tries to strangle Glossick to death.
Off-panel, of course, because Moldoff seems to be obsessed with keeping horror out of horror comics.
But Charlie makes a shocking discovery.
Aye, you are a dead being now, says Charlie as the ghost of Glossick drives him off to his new job as the cemetery's caretaker. In the final panel, the love child of Gumby and Bob hoped,
VAP, that's the mummy. He was the mascot of Beware Terror Tales, which this is reprinted from.
Yes, thank you. The mummy talks about how all of this is Charlie's punishment for being greedy, but I'd say he got off far too lightly. It's not like the ghosts are going to kill him for desecrating their graves. They're just appointing him their new caretaker. His punishment is being given a fairly easy job with free housing. So, what did you think of that one, Maureen?
It was okay, but not as good as the first two stories. First three stories if you count the text pages.
Yeah, this one was really light on the horror elements.
The only person who died was Glossick, and that was just of old age.
Hey, maybe the next story will have more of the gore we all expect and love. The fourth and final story of the issue is Valley of Shadow. It opens on 4 morons in a Jeep driving up a cliff.
Despite their crash, the 4, Roland Como, his wife Ruby, Dan Britton, and Eric, who isn't given a last name, somehow wake up in the valley completely unharmed. And while wandering through the jungle, trying to find their way back to civilization, they come upon a group of natives dressed as skeletons.
One native delivers the ominous news. The 4 explorers must meet with the Grand Kaaba, who will decide their fate. Eric pulls a gun on the native. He fires, and the gun explodes in his face, killing him.
Dan tries to flee, but the ground begins crumbling under his feet.
He's trapped in a landslide where a huge sharp rock cracks his head open. Dan Britton's body shuddered in its death throes, then slumped grotesquely. His shattered head plunged forward into the blood-flecked pool.
Ah, now there's the gore Caretaker of the Dead was missing. Roland and Ruby are taken to the Grand Kaaba's tent, where they find Eric and Dan's dead, mummified bodies. At least least I think those are Eric and Dan. It's kind of hard to tell when they're all bandaged like that.
Ruby starts freaking the hell out, and because she's a moron who doesn't recognize the pattern that trying to flee equals instant death, takes off through the jungle, and immediately sets off the tripwire to a spear trap. Those of you with weak stomachs may want to look away momentarily.
Whoa!
Yep, they actually show the spear graphically impaling Ruby's throat.
The artist draws her with really expressive eyes and really close up, too.
Yeah, I think in horror movies, for a long time at least, they weren't allowed to show the victims dying with their eyes open, as seeing their dead eyes makes it a lot scarier. Anyway, Roland sneaks up on the Grand Kaba and tries to stab him in the back, but the knife doesn't even touch him. The Grand Kaba, angered by Roland's treachery, strangles the life out of him.
Meanwhile, back at the entrance of the valley, two explorers who just fell off a rope bridge come across the wrecked jeep. That's right, everybody! Roland and friends were dead the whole time. Eric's face smashed into the steering wheel when the jeep crashed, killing him on impact. Dan flew out of the jeep and landed in a puddle where he drowned. Ruby's throat was impaled by a piece of windshield glass. I'm glad her eyes are closed here. And Roland had a massive fatal heart attack.
In the final panel, the two explorers look into Roland's eyes, and in his pupils is a cartoon skull. With gold teeth for some reason. Well, that's all the comics of the issue, but we've still got several pages of adverts left.
Hooray!
The first one is for a magic set. It's got a lot of the stock tricks you see in all the kids' magic sets, but also has a few I've never heard of. Like, what the hell is a Chinese laundry ticket? I don't know, but it sounds racist.
It's where you rip up a piece of paper with Chinese lettering on it, and then make it look like you've restored it to normal. It's like a different version of the ripping up a newspaper trick.
Huh, cool.
I can show it to you sometime. My dad owns a toy shop, and we sell a lot of little magic tricks like that.
Next is an ad for the plans to build a Leonardo da Vinci designed hang glider. Sounds like a horrible accident waiting to happen.
And underneath that is an ad for a book on hypnotism.
Which, like all ads for hypnosis-based products, suggests you use your new powers to seduce hot babes. The inside back cover is an ad for pills that help you gain weight. Weight gain pills were a really common thing to see sold out of comics back then. Like the average comic book reader needs help getting fatter. Hey.
The back cover is an ad selling tiny dogs, but I'm pretty sure it's a scam.
Of course it is. It's really an ad for a photo enlargement and colorization service. Dean Studios just used the promise of a ludicrously small dog to draw people in. And below is an ad for another photo service, Movieland Studios, spelled with a Y for some reason, that operates out of the same city as Dean Studios.
They have to be connected somehow.
So, what did you think of This Magazine is Haunted number 18, Maureen?
I loved it. I think my favorite story of it was The Last Earl.
Yeah, I think that one, and Valley of Shadow were the best of this issue.
I think Valley of Shadow was a little cliche. I've seen the whole "they were dead and in the afterlife the whole time" plot a million times before.
Maureen, they weren't just in the afterlife, they were in hell. You can say hell on my show.
But my parents might be watching. I don't want them to hear me curse on television. Hi Mom, hi Dad. Anyway, Bridegroom Come Back wasn't very scary, but I really enjoyed it since Steve Ditko drew it. I've always really liked his work for Marvel, so it was neat seeing him in this when he was just starting out.
Yeah, he was a great artist. Real shame he still hasn't gotten the respect he deserves for all his contributions to comicdom.
Oh, we should talk about one of his Marvel comics on here someday.
We should, but first, what do you think was the low point of this issue?
You know what I'm gonna say, and I know what you're gonna say. Caretaker of the Dead. It wasn't completely rotten, but it wasn't scary enough.
Yep, even in its original form where you can actually see the ghosts, it feels more like a postcode story.
But at least the art was well done.
Yeah, it was. I was a little harsh on Shelley Moldoff for holding back on the gore, but he was a really talented artist. So all in all, I'd say this was a really good comic.
It was. Thanks for letting me talk about it with you. Well, that's our show. See you next...
Holy crap, Holly, what happened to you?
A new batch of manga and model kits. Can this day get any better? Hey, it's little Lotta. VAP-Chan did an episode about you, you know.
I saw it. So, you think I look like the Baron from Dune?
Yeah, I just meant it as a joke. It was supposed to scare off the normies so they wouldn't hear VAP talk about your giant butt. I don't even write my own material. How's she able to jump that high?
Oh, well, don't worry. I've got something that'll fix you right up. Come on with me backstage.
Well, that's our show. Hope you all had a good time, Vapsketeers.
Vapsketeers? Okay, I'll allow it.
If you have any comics you'd like to see us talk about, or if you've got fan mail for us in general, tell us in the comments.